Have you ever witnessed a child born mute, desperately trying to convey something vital by sketching strange symbols on a napkin? And what if a waitress accidentally deciphered that language and uncovered a secret capable of saving an entire family from collapse? All right, dear audience, brace yourselves for a story that will leave you speechless. If you feel connected, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's incredible to see people from across the world joining us. The modest eatery called Melrose Diner sits tucked away in the heart of the bustling district. Here, hurried souls pause only to grab a quick coffee before vanishing into glass-walled offices. But for Liam Prescott, today holds no meetings. There are no stock charts to analyze. Today there is only him and Max, his 10-year-old son, silent as a solitary star. They settle at the corner table, the one hardly noticed by anyone. Liam pulls a napkin from the dispenser and lays it before Max. The boy says nothing. His thin fingers grip a ballpoint pen and begin to sketch. Liam does not stop him. He's far too accustomed to this ritual. Symbols emerge, dots, dashes, then spirals like a tangled map. Liam watches, but understands nothing. For years, Max has been this way, an island of silence. He cannot utter a sound, nor allow anyone into that private world. Liam loves his son, yet that love feels powerless when he cannot translate the only language Max knows. He's taken him everywhere, from therapy specialists in California to linguists in New York. Yet no one has reached him. No one has deciphered what Max strives to express through trembling lines on paper. Liam studies Max's face and sees his own reflection in those eyes, deep, distant, as though holding a secret the world cannot breach. He once believed time would coax Max open, but with each passing day, the distance between them thickens like an invisible pane of glass. Then a voice interrupts, gentle, unhurried, never shattering Liam's tangled thoughts. A young waitress has appeared at their table, as if summoned by some quiet intuition. Her red hair is hastily tied back, a few strands framing her forehead. Her apron bears a dusting of flour and the faint aroma of grilled fare. Yet it is her eyes that seize Liam's attention, eyes that see Max and linger on the napkin's strange symbols. Unlike everyone else, those who pass by Max as though he were a silent shadow, her gaze, Ava, as her name tag proclaims, is unhurried, free of judgment and pity. She simply observes. Then, in a slightly husky tone, as if accustomed to speaking softly in crowded rooms, she ventures, "Is the boy writing Morse code?" Liam looks up, not because her words are odd, but because this is the first time in so long someone has regarded Max's drawings as anything other than meaningless scribbles. He furrows his brow, cautious but polite. "Pardon me?" Ava waits. She retrieves her phone from her back pocket and types. Liam notices the screen's reflection in her glasses, a Morse code translator app. She scans the text, then, in a voice that seems almost uncertain whether she should intrude, says, "I studied sign language once, and these marks, they could be Morse code." Her words suspend the air between them. Liam falls silent, and Max, though showing no overt reaction, stops drawing. A stillness envelops the three of them. Liam peers into Ava's eyes, seeking to discern if she truly believes her own suggestion or merely spoke it out of reflex. But she meets his gaze. Clearly, she believes. It could be coincidence. It could be chance. But for Liam, a man who lives by logic, data, and analysis, his heart suddenly pounds with hope. a fragile spark of possibility that no one has ever mentioned. Ava remains by their table, neither rushing off nor pressing further. She waits, as though awaiting permission to enter a chamber long closed to all. Liam glances at Max. The boy still says nothing, yet his eyes have shifted away from the window for the first time, falling upon a stranger not with fear, but with recognition. Ava sat down beside Max, unhurried, careful not to startle him. She merely placed her hand softly on the table, at a respectful distance. There was no explicit offer, only a slight nod, as if asking permission to enter his quiet world. Max did not look at her, yet he did not turn away. He continued to draw. Short strokes, scattered dots, symbols only he could comprehend. Ava tilted her head, studying every movement of his pen. At first, she said nothing. She read. She translated, silently and patiently, as though poring over an ancient manuscript written in a forgotten tongue. Each symbol she whispered in her mind, her eyes tracing every line as if witnessing life in another form for the first time. After a few minutes, she leaned toward Liam, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, lock, red box, basement." Liam froze, his gaze fixed on the scrawled words, indistinct shapes, uncertain meaning. Yet for Ava, they'd become real words. He echoed them, as if to confirm what he'd heard. "What did you just read?" Ava turned back to him, this time more deliberately. Each word seemed to press heavily through her lips. Mom, lock, red box, basement. 4 words, only 4, but they ignited something in Liam's deepest memories. He remained silent, yet his body tensed. A cold wave crawled up his spine. His mind was pulled back to 3 years ago, to the day Natalie, his wife, vanished in an explosion at her research lab. A fire deemed an accident, a tragedy declared beyond hope. Everyone assumed she didn't survive, but he knew. Her body was never found. Everything was speculation. Liam did not believe in miracles, nor in mystical signs. He was a man of facts, technology, clarity. Yet here, amid the clamor of the diner and the pale yellow light cast upon the table, his son, a boy who had never uttered a single word, might be speaking of something from the past, something he dared not fully acknowledge, a possibility he'd buried long ago. Max abruptly ceased drawing. The pen hovered in midair, as if a sudden awareness had swept through his small frame. He looked at Ava, not a fleeting glance, nor the cursory look a child gives a stranger, but a steady gaze. His eyes seemed to probe her expression, seeking a response, a confirmation, someone who truly heard him. Liam sensed everything shift. The space was no longer just a diner. Time no longer mere present. What he was witnessing was change. The first real connection between Max and someone other than himself. He wanted to intervene, to speak, to force words out, but he could not. Not now. Not with such fragile hope poised on the brink of breaking. Max held Ava's gaze, and Ava, still silent, offered only the slightest nod. So slight, yet in that moment, it felt as though the entire world had opened. The boy set down his pen, not because he'd run out of things to say, but because perhaps he'd finally said all he needed. Liam looked at his son as though for the very first time, not merely at the small body, nor the trembling hands wrought by tension, but at the eyes that had silently pleaded, told their story, and survived 3 years of being utterly misunderstood. And today, Max had found someone who understood. No words, no sound, only dots and dashes. The feeling that flooded Liam's chest was not astonishment, but pain. The pain of not seeing sooner. The pain of having stood by his son's side, yet remaining as distant as two cliffs. And the pain of knowing. If what Max drew was true, then Natalie had never truly left their child's mind. She lived on, in memory, in feeling, in every symbol scattered across that napkin. Liam remained silent and needed no words, for he too was relearning how to listen, not with his ears but with his heart. That night, when darkness had swallowed the high-rise blocks of Lincoln Park, Liam drove silently back to the familiar mansion. Max slept in the back seat, his face peaceful, as if he'd never hinted at a secret in that small diner this afternoon. Liam carried his son to his room, his footsteps soft, as though afraid to rouse a dream. But in truth, it was he who dared not face reality. The door to Max's room clicked shut behind him, and Liam stood in the hallway for a long moment. His heart was a maelstrom, torn between hope and doubt, between the pain of the past and the fear that everything might be a misunderstanding. Yet something in Max's eyes when he looked at Ava compelled him to believe. Believe in those symbols, believe in the message, believe that Natalie had never truly vanished. Liam descended to the basement, the place he'd avoided for 3 years. The banister was cold beneath his hand. The scent of old wood and dust swirled around him. Each breath a reminder of memories he'd buried. Each step grew heavier. He had not dared come down here since Natalie's lab burned. Everything remained as it had on the last day she was alive in his world. He swept his gaze across the cramped room, then halted in front of a bookshelf that had toppled at an angle. Something in his memory stirred. Liam knelt, running his fingers through every crack. He tapped lightly on the wooden wall behind it, a hollow echo. His hand trembled as he removed each dusty plank. Behind the wood lay a dark red metal box, encrusted with cobwebs, aged but intact. He lifted the box, the chill radiating through his sleeve. Placing it on the workbench, he drew a deep breath before opening it. Inside lay a silver hard drive and a thick dossier, its cover stamped in bold letters. Ouroboros Protocol. Confidential. In that instant, Liam's heart clenched. This was the project Natalie had pursued. A self-securing AI that could bypass any firewall, capable of revolutionizing data security. She had called it her second child. But after the fire, no one had found the data. Everyone believed it destroyed. And Liam, he'd never been granted access to the final version. Natalie had kept it separate, fearing that in the wrong hands the technology could wreak havoc. Yet here it was before him, not a draft, not a prototype, but the final version, and it seemed Natalie had hidden it on purpose. Liam opened the dossier. His eyes scanned line after line of code, annotations, schematics. Each turned page felt like a needle piercing his heart. Why had she told him nothing? Why hide it? Why let Max carry that message in his heart for 3 years while Natalie herself disappeared without a trace? Tears welled unbidden, not from anger, but from a mixture of pain and relief. That feeling that she was still out there, still caring, still protecting him and their son in her own way. She had not abandoned them. She had only tried to keep them safe. That hard drive was more than a lifeline for Liam's company, currently embroiled in a lawsuit over alleged intellectual property theft. It was evidence that Natalie might have uncovered something so dangerous she had to vanish. Liam could not know precisely what had happened, but he understood one thing. This was no accident. It was a choice, a message, a plea for help. He gripped the hard drive as though holding a piece of the woman he loved. Liam did not know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. He would not let go. Not now, not when his son, a boy who had never spoken a word, had become the link to the truth. That night, Liam sat alone at his desk, the lamp's glow reflecting off his tense features. In front of him lay the computer, the hard drive, and the dossier. Outside, the city roared on, but within him, everything was beginning to change. Max's silence was no longer a barrier, but a door ajar. And beyond that door was Natalie. Dear audience, take a moment to relax or sip some water, then stay tuned for the shocking developments ahead. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always wonderful to see viewers joining us from around the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the story, and we'll keep bringing you more great tales. The next morning, Liam returned to Melrose Diner, not for a meal, nor because the coffee had been poor. He came back driven by an irresistible impulse. For Ava's eyes, for the symbols Max had drawn, and for the truth seeping into the cracks of his mind. Ava stood behind the counter, bent over her sales notebook. When she looked up, she saw Liam approaching. No polite greeting, no reintroduction. Liam spoke, his voice hoarse from sleeplessness. You studied sign language and Morse code? Ava set down her pen. Without hesitation, she nodded. I interned at a speech therapy center in Wisconsin. My sister was born unable to speak. I learned everything I could to understand her. Liam swallowed hard. Her words pierced him like a silent dagger, for he knew the helplessness of not understanding his own son had haunted him for 3 years. I think my son is trying to tell me something about his mother, about Natalie. She disappeared in a fire, but her body was never found. Ava asked nothing more. She showed no baffled surprise, no feigned pity. She simply looked at him, long and steady, then nodded. I want to help Max, she said slowly. But not as a waitress. If I can, I want to be with him every day, not to serve meals, but to listen, to translate for him, to help him speak. Liam did not answer immediately. A wave of relief and fear surged within him, like standing on the edge of an abyss, clutching a rope whose strength he doubted. That afternoon, Ava submitted her resignation. She left Melrose Diner, the weary refuge after her years of study and caregiving. That evening, she came to Liam's house, not as a hired hand, nor as a curious stranger, but as the holder of the key to Max's silence. The house was eerily quiet when she entered. Max sat in the living room, his small hand busy with his private symbols. Liam stood silently behind, as if afraid to disturb the fragile concentration. Ava sat down, unhurried. She tilted her head, observing every dash and curve Max drew. She asked nothing, she only translated. Night, red light, mom ran, no scream, basement again. Each word a fragment of a story piecing itself together. Ava looked up at Liam, his face ashen. Those words were not mere imagination. They were memory. They were proof. Then Max looked at her. The boy said nothing, but his eyes seemed to ask, Do you understand? Ava nodded, as lightly as a touch upon the soul. I understand, I'm listening. All night, Ava did not leave Max's side. She sat with him, decoding each cluster of symbols in turn. Liam lingered behind, refraining from intruding, but each translated word cut deeply into his heart. What Natalie had left behind, not on paper, not in libraries or hard drives, but in the very son they had created. She had chosen Max to preserve her final message, and Max, in his silence, had always tried to convey it. Now, with Ava's presence, that door had begun to open. Liam did not know where this story would lead them, but in this moment, he knew for certain. His son was speaking, and he, for the first time in 3 years, was beginning to hear. The old, dusty hard drive, when connected to the computer, unleashed a chain of events no one anticipated: encrypted files, fragmented video clips, and truncated documents emerged like pieces of a dark mosaic. But as Liam painstakingly pieced them together, a horrific truth gradually came into view. The laboratory where Natalie once worked did not suffer a random accident. It was an orchestrated act, meticulous, cold, and deliberate. The defense contractor that had offered to buy her invention was turned down. Natalie refused to sell what she believed could be misused, and the price she paid was vanishing without a trace. She knew what would happen. Driven by a silent yet unmistakable dread, Natalie chose to store all her documentation and source code, not on servers, not in databanks, but in their own home, in the dark basement room behind its hidden wall. Yet that was not all. To safeguard that information, she locked it with Morse code, a living password, not characters, not fingerprints, but the memory of a mute child. Max, the boy once thought helpless before the world, became the vessel for Natalie's final secret. He, in all his silence, preserved the flame of truth through every dot, every dash, and in those eloquent eyes. Liam no longer harbored doubt. He gathered every piece of data, made a copy, and sent it to the FBI, accompanied by a detailed report. The investigation began in secrecy. No media cameras, no fanfare, only shadowy figures pursuing justice for a woman who had disappeared. In the weeks that followed came intense work sessions, interrogations, electronic history audits, tracing anonymous accounts, and cross-referencing system logs. Gradually, every piece of evidence pointed to one fact: the fire was fabricated. The perpetrators were lead researchers colluding with external organizations to seize Natalie's technology. Natalie has still not been found. No one dares claim she is alive. But one thing is certain: she did not walk away. She did not hide. She did not surrender. She fought, quietly, stealthily, and left her final weapon to her little son. Her name has been restored. Reputational damages have been retracted. Major news outlets published "The Forgotten Scientist, Natalie Prescott, and the Truth Behind the Tech Curtain." The tech world reeled. Liam's company, once thought doomed, was revived by the patent Natalie had hidden. Yet to Liam, that mattered less than a deeper truth. His wife never turned her back. She trusted him and Max until her final moment. And Max, the boy who had never spoken a word, had conveyed that message in the language only he and his mother understood, in a code no system could crack: with his heart. Liam sat alone in his study, the screen's glow reflected on his face as a file appeared. To Max. A video recorded by Natalie before she vanished. Her voice trembled yet remained resolute. "If I do not return, show Dad the drawing. He will understand, and remember, you are never the silent child. You are my voice. I love you." Liam broke down in tears, not for what was lost, but for what remained, alive in every heartbeat of his son, Max. A few months later, as the season's first snow began to dust the Prescott home's eaves, a strange peace settled over the space once haunted by loss. That house, once a prison of silence, had become a haven for wordless connections. Ava, the young woman who had begun as an incidental waitress, now stood as an indispensable presence, no longer an outsider, no longer merely an observer. She was the bridge. Liam, whose spirit had been fractured by long days of doubt and loneliness, now woke each morning transformed. He no longer viewed Max as something to be fixed. He saw his son with respect and empathy, as a boy carrying the living memory of the woman he loved. Natalie's body no longer walked this earth, but her existence had infused every movement of Max, every look in his eyes, and every ounce of Liam's trust in Ava. Max began to take small steps, not in speech, but in faith. He learned to spell with his hands, arranging colorful plastic letters on the table to form messages. Ava sat opposite him, patiently awaiting each piece. Whenever Max completed a word, his eyes would light up as though he'd just solved a cipher only he could understand. Liam, at first content merely to watch, grew accustomed to listening without sound. He even began reading aloud to Max, never mind whether his son cared, because it no longer mattered. As afternoon light turned golden through the living room windows, the three of them gathered around the long wooden table, a portrait of an imperfect but genuine family. Max gripped his small stylus, his hands trembling as he attempted a new Morse symbol, only for Ava to translate it into spoken words. She never hurried. She waited, and when she understood, her eyes met Max's with nothing but admiration, not because he was brilliant, but because he was brave. Liam smiled sometimes, a quiet smile, but one potent enough to dispel the darkness within him. He had once believed that life's essence lay in noise, signed contracts, whirring servers, the bells and buzz of the tech world. Yet each day taught him that true life is found in the faintest vibrations of those we love. Ava's nod when Max spelled hello, the silent hand on his shoulder as his son entered the room, the gentle tap-tap of Max's finger on the tabletop, a private melody unheard by others, yet felt by all. Max's birthday arrived on a crisp Chicago morning. The three of them went to Millennium Park, where the last crimson leaves clung to the pathways. Liam carried a small cake. Ava held a camera. Max hugged his box of symbols to his chest. As the sun dipped low, Ava quietly handed Liam a piece of paper. Not a lavish card, but a simple sheet of notebook paper, carefully folded. Liam unfolded it. The scrawled words, written with sincere effort, read, "Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Ava. Mom would be proud." His hand clenched the paper. His chest tightened. But he did not cry from sadness. He wept from hope. For the first time in years, he felt his family had never truly broken. They had only needed to learn to speak in another language, a language that required no words, yet resonated deep within the heart. One symbol, one family, one second chance. And Max, the boy who had lived in silence, was finally being heard. The story of Liam, Max, and Ava stands as proof that sometimes what saves a family does not come from doctors, nor from millions of dollars, but from someone willing to listen to the unheard, understand the misunderstood, and believe in what others call meaningless. If this story touched you, share it to remind everyone that love can be written in Morse code. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see viewers from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the story, so we can continue bringing you more great tales.